is John Kohler with OKRaw.com. Today we're going to answer a very important question. Where do you get your calories on a raw foods diet? There's only a few places calories could come from on a raw foods diet, and I'm going to share with you my views on that today. There's other people that say, you don't have to worry about your calories, you don't have to count your calories. But I believe that people should be concerned about where their calories come from. I personally don't count my calories. After being into raw foods for 15 years now, I kind of know where my body's at. But in the beginning, if I'm doing coaching, I do recommend people keep a food journal and track what they're eating to see where their calories are coming from and, how many calories they're eating. Because one of the problems that I see a lot on raw foods is that people simply don't eat enough calories. So that being said, on a raw foods diet, your calories could come from two main places. Basically, it's either from fruit or from fat. So today, I'm lucky to be standing underneath a kiwi vine, and the kiwis are now in season in California. I mean, this vine produces so much fruit. I tend to get most of my calories from fruit and not fat. So some people on the raw foods diet would say you should get about 10% of your calories from fat, and that's probably a good goal to achieve, but that, in my opinion, can be low for a little bit of people. We are all individuals, and we all need to figure out, despite what your favorite raw food leader says or what I say, you need to figure out what's best for you. So the range that I like to say is, you want to get between 10 and 20% maximum of your calories from fat. Any more fat than that, you could get in a lot of trouble. I mean, fat will basically just slow you down, whether it's from an animal fat or whether it's from a plant fat. It's still fat. It still basically can clog up your arteries, and definitely there are some fats that are better than others. So I tend to do a higher fruit diet, and I see that works a lot for younger people or for people that are active. For some people, it may not work quite as good. People have sensitivities with eating too much sugar. If you are sensitive to the sugars in some of the sweet fruits and you just can't do it, the best thing to do is you want to basically dilute those fruits with some extra greens. So for example, if you just can't handle eating a straight apple, eat one bite of apple and then have one bite of a cucumber, or eat one bite of an apple and then one bite of some romaine lettuce, or one bite of an apple and one bite of some celery. And that way you're mixing up the extra fiber with the fruit to add more fiber, so that it'll basically slow down the absorption of the sugar. The problem with the sugar is that some people's bodies are just, their digestion is the sugar is gonna give them a big sugar rush, and it's not so good unless you get used to it. So over time, if you do want to build up the amount of fruit you want to eat, then you want to slowly, add the fiber to what you're eating, the fruits that you're eating, and then slowly reduce the amount of additional fiber in the forms of, celery, cucumbers, or romaine lettuce that you are eating. So then you can just eat an apple alone, because I think that's definitely the best. So next, let's talk about dried fruit and nuts. A lot of people that get into raw foods, they look to meet their caloric requirements through dried fruits and nuts. And why is that? Well, that's because those are really intense, concentrated sources of calories. Nuts and dried fruits have a lot more caloric density than other foods. And, I don't really necessarily recommend eating nuts and dried fruits as your main source of calories. That could definitely get you into problems in the long run. The number one thing with both those are that they are not water rich. We are 70 to 75% water. And if we're not eating water-rich foods ourselves, then the foods we're eating is going to dehydrate us. Also, because there's no water in the dried fruits, it makes the sugar that much more potent, basically, and there's a lot more sugar per the given same thing. So take, for example, one whole fresh persimmon and one dried persimmon. There's the same amount of sugar, given it's off the same tree and whatnot. But, because of the extra water content in that fresh persimmon, basically the ratios of the water and the sugar be different, and the sugar is going to basically digest a little bit differently because it's basically being then diluted with all that water. So I highly encourage people to eat fresh fruits and fresh vegetables of fat. So to stay between the 10% to 20% of calories from fat a day, I basically my goal is to have one handful of nuts. I am a little bit lenient, so I do give myself a second handful sometimes. So if you're smaller, that means you can eat less. If you're larger, you can eat larger handfuls because your hands are a lot bigger. That being said, I prefer the water-rich fats instead, because they tend to, once again, just like the dried persimmon and the fresh persimmon, basically have a lot of water content. So things like avocados and things like coconuts, are a much better source, in my opinion, of the fats because they are basically diluted down. Well, some people say, hey, John, I can't do the high fruit thing, and I know the high fat thing isn't good. What do I do? Well, there's a couple answers. If you want to be raw and stay raw, then the next thing you could do is you want to check out a video I made with my friend Kailash. It says fruits, fats, or sprouted grains. So sprouted grains is an excellent answer to stay raw and still get your calories because sprouted grains have more caloric density than, say, lettuce and leafy greens. And they're not going to add the sugar and they're not going to add the fat. So I recommend this non-glutinous sprouted grains such as quinoa, amaranth, millet, and buckwheat to sprout those and then to eat those to get your source of calories. The other way to do it is if you don't want to be raw, eat some sprouted and steamed grains, or even just steamed grains. So you could sprout your grains, which would be good. You could eat those raw, or you could actually cook them, which is better than just cooking grains without sprouting them. Or you could maybe get some like brown rice, cook the brown rice up, steam it up, or steam your vegetables. Another good way to concentrate the nutrients and concentrate the calories so that you could actually eat more and still feel satisfied. I don't necessarily recommend that people try to do the 100% raw way because it can be challenging for a lot of people, and we have these emotions and things that get in the way. And some people think cooked foods are comfort foods. I've kind of grown out of that by now, but some people really have challenges with that. So I'd highly encourage, most people to eat a high percentage of raw foods, including fresh fruits and fresh vegetables, keeping your fat percentage, between, as I said, 10 to 20%, and then having some cooked whole vegan foods such as steamed rice or steamed sprouted grains or steamed sprouted beans. And I didn't mention sprouted beans as a good source of calories because most beans have enzyme inhibitors and other toxins in them that actually need to be cooked before you eat them. So there's only a few actually sprouted beans that I eat, and that's not even on a regular basis. So sprouted beans and sprouted grains to get your source of calories because you need to get a certain amount of calories. As much as other people may say calories are not important, well, they are and they are not important. We need to eat enough food to maintain us, to build us up, and to keep us going, but we don't want to eat too little. And unfortunately, calorie is basically a way to determine that until you've been doing this long enough and you could feel and know that you are eating enough food. So let's sum it up. We need to get our calories from somewhere. Some raw food camps say get it from fruit. Some people actually don't say necessarily get it from fat, but they say don't eat fruit. So by default, if you're not getting it from fruit, many of those kinds of recipes, you're getting it from fat, especially in the oil. So, olive oil and other oils are basically 1 tablespoon is like 100 calories. And that's a lot of fat. And basically, oil is pure fat. You got to think of it that way. And you could pack on the calories and really ramp up your percentage of fat that you're eating by adding extracted oil. So for that reason, I recommend eating only whole fats, such as whole nuts, coconuts, in their whole form. Because basically, if you want to eat olive oil, instead of that, eat, whole olives or dried olives. Instead of eating coconut oil, eat, whole coconuts. The better thing instead of coconut oil would be a coconut butter, which at least has some fiber. But I'd still encourage you to eat that product or eat that food fresh, which is always best. Freshest is always bestest is what I like to say. So fruit and fat is one thing, and if you don't want to get it from fruit, you're probably going to get it from fat. So be smart about it. And then if you want to stay raw, go for the sprouted grains. Sprout your non-glutinous grains, and then you could eat them. You could also actually sprout your grains and then process them in the food processor or in the blender. Mix it up with a little bit of liquid, and that'll basically expand the surface area of those grains, so actually you'll get a better digestion of those grains because most people don't chew their food enough. You don't want to do that, and then you want to go to the cooked foods. Then the best cooked foods to eat would be obviously sprouted either grains or sprouted beans, and then steam them up to cook them, or something like steamed vegetables. So you could do steamed common greens or broccoli, or even things like sweet potatoes, which have a lot more caloric density than other things. So that'd be the maybe 20% of your diet would be some steamed cooked vegetables, and 80% would still remain raw. And you want to do a good percentage of the raw fresh fruits and fresh vegetables always. So hopefully that covers this topic. Once again, this is John Kohler with OKRaw.com, and keep eating your fresh fruits and vegetables. They're good stuff.